So this last week we talked about bandwidth and clients and servers, and I think a lot of that was covered pretty well in the videos, but there were a few things that weren't in the videos that I do want to talk about. For instance, the primary thing that I want to talk about is why do we care about bandwidth and the technology that people are using on their computers, the clients. In this case, we're not talking about clients as the people that we're dealing with. We're talking about clients as the technology that's being used to access our websites. So a client could be a desktop computer, it could be a mobile phone, it could be a computer from 1980. Not really, but not likely on the internet. But you get the point. Um, it could also be a gaming system with a 4K monitor. So what we're dealing with here is a pretty large range of connection speeds and technology that's being used to access our websites. So as designers, as web designers and developers, it's really critical for us to understand how that impacts what we do. Starting out looking at bandwidth as we approach bandwidth, that impacts how we design our sites in terms of how fast can they access our website, how long is it going to take our website to download. That impacts the user experience in a lot of ways as far as what kind of decisions we make about what content we put on our website. If we know that we're going to have a clientele that's going to have mostly slow internet connections, we're going to have to be careful with how much video content, rich media we use, even maybe scaling the images that we use down back a little bit and trying to use alternative technology to create the imagery that may not be so size intensive. The same thing goes for some of the other technologies that are being used to access our website, and in terms of the way a computer accesses our website. So if we have a lot of mobile devices, that's going to change how we design our website compared to if our market is primarily desktop users. If we know we're dealing with a demographic that's going to be using older technology, we're going to have to be more careful about how we design things in terms of how CPU intensive is our site. Are we going to use a lot of JavaScript, a lot of things that require dynamic things happening on the screen that may have a harder time for slower computers? Um, Back in the day, we used Adobe Flash. We had to consider whether they would have the Flash plugin installed, and even if they did, how intensive was what we were doing in Adobe Flash. That's not really an issue anymore, but we've replaced Adobe Flash with some other newer technology like Flash or like JavaScript and jQuery, jQuery UI, uh, things like that all are executed on the client side still on the computer of the person who's accessing our website, not on our server. So that impacts how we make decisions when we design things. Um, that really boils down to the concept of know your demographic. You have to understand who you're designing for and what the market looks like for your primary audience. In this case, we really need to look at what capabilities they have, what their average screen resolution is, whether they're going to be connecting mostly on mobile devices, tablets, desktop devices. Really understanding the demographic of who we're designing for changes and shapes the way we design. Um, and understanding, going back to some of the things that were discussed on the quiz that weren't in the materials, the reading materials, as far as the way bandwidth works and the way we think about bandwidth. Probably there's two metaphors that I like to use in terms of describing how that works. One of them is a pipe of water. Bandwidth is equivalent to how wide the pipe is, so how much water can move through that pipe at any given time. It's not the speed of the water moving through the pipe, that's throughput. So throughput is the speed of the water moving through the pipe. Bandwidth is how wide the pipe is, and that impacts the speed, but it really impacts volume more than speed. The other analogy that I like to use is a highway with the number of lanes, where bandwidth is the number of lanes in the highway and throughput is the speed of the traffic on the highway. So we're dealing with two kind of different things here, throughput and bandwidth. Bandwidth is kind of the generic term that is often used to describe both throughput and bandwidth, a combination of the two. In our case, though, we kind of consider it to be, in general terms, how long does it take all of the content from the server to get to the content on the client. So it's kind of a combination of throughput and bandwidth that we're really concerned about. So those are the two analogies that I like to use when we're talking about bandwidth between the servers and the clients. Um, just going back to what we said earlier, as far as understanding your client, that's really going to be critical as we move forward. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're dealing with the projects, especially the final project. You're going to have to kind of analyze that as part of your final project submission. The first half of that project, the project proposal, I want you to address that as we're working on the project proposal.